Some friendships are impossible to explain. They go back to times before ambition, identity, needs and responsibilities grow. And while life and times move people apart, there are some friendships which aren't just remembered but celebrated, not just by people but by history. This is one such timeless tale of one who went on to become the most beloved of kings across the three worlds, and the other a man who sometimes didn't even have enough food to feed his children. Theirs was a friendship that remained immortalized in all of Indian mythology. Samsara Sagas presents the story of Sudama, the friend Krishna ran to receive. Sudama's existence in history came to be known because of the ashram of Sandipani. Sandipani was one of the greatest teachers of his age, and his students came from across the world to sit at his feet. Among them, at the same time, studying under the same roof, sleeping on the same mat-covered floors, eating the same simple meals were two boys. One was Krishna, always carrying within him something luminous and enormous that even he perhaps did not fully yet understand. The other was Sudama, a Brahmin boy from a modest family, serious about his studies, gentle in his manner, and utterly unremarkable by every worldly measure. They became friends, living equally as young and poor children with no distraction from one another. They studied together. They argued about what they had learned. They laughed at things that were probably not very funny. They were, for the years of that ashram, just two boys who knew each other more deeply than the world around them knew either of them. There is a story from those years that is almost never told. Once, Sandipani's wife sent the two boys into the forest to collect firewood. While they were deep in the trees, a storm arrived, sudden and serious, turning the forest dark at midday. They could not find their way back. They spent the whole night in the forest, cold and frightened, huddled together against the rain. When morning came and they found their way back, Sandipani saw the state of them. He blessed them. He said, "Because you bore this together without complaint, all the knowledge you have learnt here will remain with you, always." Little did Sudama imagine that the night in the forest, where he huddled close, holding on to his dear friend till the morning, was the moment he would be walking towards decades later on his journey to Dwarka. The glorious years at the ashram came to an inevitable end, and the boys went their separate ways. Their paths diverged so completely that the distance between them became almost impossible to describe. Krishna became Krishna, the king of Dwarka, one of the most magnificent cities of the age. He became the friend, guide, and charioteer of the Pandavas. He became the voice that spoke the Bhagavad Gita on the battle of Kurukshetra. He became, in the understanding of millions, an avatar of Vishnu himself. The world arranged itself around him. Sudama became a poor man. Not poor in spirit, never that. By all accounts, he was a man of deep learning, genuine devotion, and a contentment that was undeniably real. He married a woman named Sushila, who loved him without reservations and who was in many ways the backbone of everything that kept their household from complete despair. But the family experienced the kind of poverty where going to bed hungry was a familiar daily ritual. Sudama never complained. He never asked for anything. He never invoked his friendship with Krishna, not because he doubted the friendship, but because he could not bring himself to use it as a means to an end. There was something in him that felt it would be a kind of betrayal to walk into that palace with a need in his hands. Years passed, perhaps many years. The poverty deepened. And then one day, Sushila sat her husband down. She was the one who said, "Go." Sushila had watched her husband, this learned, gentle, proud man, carry the weight of their poverty with a dignity that she honored and a silence that was beginning to cost him something she couldn't name. And she knew that he had a friend in Dwarka, that the friend had not forgotten him. and that the only thing standing between Sudama and asking for help was Sudama himself. She said, "You have a friend, a true one. Go to him." Her words, laden with tenderness, didn't come as a command. They implored Sudama. Sudama hesitated. What would he bring? You do not go to the king of Dwarka empty-handed. But what did they have? Sushila gathered what she could from the neighbors. A small quantity of flattened rice, or poha, tied into a bundle using the corner of an old cloth. Barely a handful. Barely enough to even offer a sparrow. She pressed it into his hands. She straightened his clothing, and she told him to go. There's something in that gesture. A woman sending her husband to ask for help with a bundle of flattened rice and a clean dhoti that is filled with grace and generosity that is hard to explain. She did not pretend the gift was grand. She did not apologize for it. She wrapped what they had with what dignity she could and sent him forward. Sudama took the bundle and began to walk toward Dwarka, ashamed of the rice, grateful for the wife, uncertain of almost everything else. The journey to Dwarka was long, and it gave Sudama time. Time to think about what he looked like. Time to imagine the gates of that city and the guards at those gates and the expression on their faces when this thin, dusty Brahmin in worn sandals explained who he had come to see. Time to wonder whether friendship could really survive this kind of distance. Not the distance of miles, but the other kind. The distance between a man who had everything and a man who had almost nothing. Whether Krishna, surrounded by queens and courtiers and the perpetual business of a kingdom, would even remember. Whether he should have come at all. He walked, and he held the little bundle of flattened rice, and he walked. When Dwarka came into view, the texts say he stopped. Dwarka was a city that defied ordinary description. Gold and jewels, towers that caught the light, streets that hummed with prosperity and order. It was a sight that made everyone stop in their tracks and become aware of everything they are not. Sudama smoothed his dhoti. He adjusted the bundle. He walked through the gates, and he asked for Krishna. Kings do not run. It has nothing to do with dignity or vanity. It is simply how courts function. A king receives. He sits at the center of the room, and the world comes to him. He does not move toward anything. Things move toward him. It is the language of power. Krishna ran. The moment his attendants told him that Sudama, his friend from the ashram, the boy from the forest storm, was at the gate, he left. Mid-audience, mid-conversation, mid whatever it was he was doing, he left it all and he ran. He met Sudama at the gate. He embraced him. The texts say he wept, simply, immediately, inconsolably, and without self-consciousness. He brought him inside. He sat him on his own seat. He called for water to wash Sudama's feet, the gesture of welcome reserved for the most honored guest. His wives came forward with lamps and flowers. And then Krishna sat beside his friend, and they talked. The way they must have talked in the ashram, when they were boys and the night was long and the world outside didn't know their names yet. Like no time had passed, because between real friends, time doesn't pass the way it does for everyone else. There is a detail here that lives in the older narrations, and it's almost never mentioned in the popular ones. Krishna noticed the bundle in Sudama's hands. He reached for it. Sudama held it back, instinctively ashamed. A handful of flattened rice, in this palace, for this man. Krishna grabbed it anyway. He opened it. He took a handful of the poha. He ate it. And the texts say he wept again. Not because of hunger, but because it tasted like the ashram, like being young and poor and nobody together, like a cold night in a forest with a friend who did not leave. Some scholars say that Krishna ate 2 handfuls, and then Rukmini, his queen, gently stopped him, understanding as queens do that this moment was sufficient unto itself. and did not need to become a cosmic event. 2 handfuls of a poor man's rice, eaten with tears by the most powerful being in the 3 worlds. Here is what Sudama did not do. He did not ask for anything. He had walked all that way. He had overcome his pride and his shame and his fear of being seen in his poverty. He had pressed himself through those magnificent gates and let himself be received and loved by a man who was essentially God. And when the moment came, when they were sitting together and Krishna's warmth was around him like the sun, it would have been so natural, so easy to say. But he didn't. He could not bring himself to name the want. Not here, not to this friend. Perhaps because in that room, in that presence, that want seemed to dissolve. He had come to see if the friendship was still true, and it was. He left the next day, walking home the same dusty road with nothing in his hands, lighter than he had been in years. When he reached the place where his home should have been, he stopped. The hut was gone. In its place stood a house, warm and solid and real, and inside it, Sushila and his children, dressed in clean clothes, well fed, their faces carrying something they hadn't carried in a very long time. Ease. He stood at the threshold and wept, not at the house, at the fact that he had not had to ask, that his friend had seen him, truly seen him, and had given without being asked. That is the hardest and rarest gift in human experience, to be known so well that your unspoken need is answered before it becomes a word. What was Sudama actually chasing all those years? He was not chasing wealth. He could have gone to Krishna long before desperation and asked. He was not chasing fame. He was not even chasing comfort, because a man who endures poverty for years without complaint has made some kind of peace with it. What Sudama was living, in his study, his devotion, in the quiet dignity with which he carried a life the world considered small, was a life of purpose. Not success, purpose. The two are not the same thing, and we would do well to feel the difference between them. We live in a world that changes its measure of worth almost seasonally. Once it was land, then it was title, then money. Now it's followers, visibility, the size of the room you can fill. And there is always someone around you who seems to be accumulating more of whatever the current measure is, moving faster, climbing higher, arriving earlier. And you wonder if you're falling behind something, even if you cannot name what that something is. Sudama never fell behind his own life. Even in poverty, even in the years when the rice was not enough, he remained oriented towards something that the world could not grant and could not revoke. That is not a small thing. That's perhaps the rarest thing. And then there is the other thing this story quietly insists on, the thing about friendship. Not the friendship of convenience, not the friendship of proximity or mutual usefulness, or being in the same season of life. The kind that was formed when neither person had anything to offer except themselves, and that remarkably was exactly enough. Krishna had everything. He ran anyway, not because Sudama could do anything for him, but because Sudama was someone who had known him before any of it, before the kingdom, before the war, before the Gita, when he was just a boy in a forest, cold and frightened, with a friend beside him who did not leave. That is what the world cannot give you and cannot take from you. A person who sees you, not the version of you that is performing, not the version that is succeeding or failing, not the garb you're currently wearing, but you, the essential you, underneath all the accumulation. If you have even one such person, you are, by the measure of this story uses, rich. And if you're still looking, if that person has not yet appeared, or if time and distance and life have pulled you apart from someone who once knew you that way, then perhaps what Sushila knew is the thing to carry home tonight. Go with what you have, even if what you have is barely a handful. even if you're ashamed of how small it seems, even if you are not sure it will be received. The friend who is meant for you will take it from your hands, and they will hold it as though it is the most precious thing they have ever been given, because it will be you. After meeting Krishna, Sudama walked home with nothing in his hands and everything in his heart. He had not conquered anything. He had not performed any great act of valor or sacrifice or renunciation. He had simply gone to find a friend, carrying what little he had, and discovered that the friendship was exactly what it had always been. That is the story of Sudama, a man who almost didn't go, a wife who made him, a friend who ran, and a handful of rice that tasted like everything that matters. And while the story ends here, the journey always continues within you.